Welcome, everybody. So I'll do introductions in a minute, and I'll save myself for the possibility that Nigel Whalley may overcome his technical difficulties. He ought to be able to, because he's managing director of this a prop tech company. So we should rely on him to be able to do that. Anyway, we, or stroke I, are going to be talking about the hidden potential for improved products and services, if we can only improve the relationship between the consumers and the producers of the built environment. So I'll introduce our respective companies, Nigel and mine. We're going to be talking about the qualities of engagement and the phenomenon of consumer pull. We're going to be talking about the implications of I think Nigel's just joined us. So
he has, yes.
Looking propitious. We're going to be talking about the implications of consumer-led R&D and the rate at which the rate of improvement of products can be accelerated thereby. The concept of home performance labeling, and Nigel, I hope, will be talking about in that context, the digital logbooks for which his firm is responsible. And then we're going to end up with the notorious performance gap, what we can do about it, and the concept of post-occupancy evaluation. So first off, a notable quote. We did some work which I'll be talking about a bit later on. And in the foreword, Mark Clare, who was then the managing director of Barratt Developments, said, "We have to provide much better information to buyers. I find it difficult to understand why, when the reduced running costs of a new home are so overwhelmingly better, we are not delivering this sort of comparison today. If we can know the salt and calorie content of a bowl of soup," he's saying, as opposed to a packet of cornflakes, why can't we know more about the performance of a new home? I thought it was very striking to get that kind of a commitment from a home builder. And of course, the home builders stand to gain tremendously in what is currently their very disadvantaged position in the housing market by comparison with the second-hand market. If only they could get the message across, and to be honest, if only they could get the quality of their product to be better. So Mark Clare believed, and we believe, Nigel and I, that there's a prospect of improving both if we can understand better information about the products that people are buying or renting. But before we begin, a brief introduction from me and my practice, and then there'll be a slide following Nigel for you to describe Chimni. So this is HTA Design. We've been in business actually for more than 50 years in various different manifestations, and I joined Hunt Thompson Associates, as it then was, in 1973, God help me, and I've been part of the organisation man and boy. These thumbnails describe the kinds of projects that we do. There are about 240 of us at the moment, and we're an interdisciplinary practice, including planning, architecture, pre and post-planning approval services. We do urban design, we do building physics, communication design, and we have a really important and growing part of our work, which is our landscape design team, whose role in master planning and delivering well-being on our projects is increasingly important. So that's HTA. Now let's see if Nigel has overcome his technical difficulties. Over to you, Nigel, to describe your business.
Thank you. It's always funny when the digital tech company are the ones having the digital tech problems on a project like that. Chimni, we are what we call a digital property logbook company. And our vision is that every home in the country, whether new build or an existing build, should have a secure digital repository of all documentation, certification, and increasingly a core data summary of their product. And our vision is that everybody should know, whether it's new or old, exactly what their home is made of, how all the systems work. And in an increasingly kind of complex home world, where we've got systems like solar panels and heat pumps and all these kind of things are gradually arriving in our homes, we're giving them a dashboard to manage this more complex landscape for their home. And so that's
okay. Thank you very much indeed, Nigel. There'll be more detail from Nigel presently. As Simon mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, its source really is this work I did in writing a book, which came to be called Home Truths. I was actually invited by a publisher to write a book about housing. I parted company with them because we wanted a product which was a pleasure to have, and their production values were a bit grim. So we published it ourselves. We set up our own publishing company, Hatch Editions, and if after this presentation you feel moved to buy a copy, you can do so from Amazon or from RIBA publications. It's essentially a primer for aspiring planners and designers of places and homes. It talks about the lessons from the 20th century utopias that have got us to where we are today with the current zeitgeist and the failures in housing delivery. It talks about the social context for practice. It talks about planners and planning and the very important assertion that the planners are on our side, not our enemy, as the current incumbents in Westminster would have you believe. We talk about learning from loved housing in the past in the book, and we talk about the importance of street-based urbanism as a successful urban form. We talk about diversity and design for everybody, the benefits of factory construction, and of course, a significant chapter which I'll be referring to later on sustainable design. There's another chapter which actually lends its name to this talk, Let the People Decide. And the purpose of that title was to provide an antidote to this, which ever since I was a student, I've always rather adhered to, the suspicion of George Bernard Shaw that the professions are all a conspiracy against the laity. And the proposition here is, of course, that a better communication between the recipients of services of all sorts and the deliverers overcomes that mistrust. What Shaw, who is a difficult character, to be honest, described by one commentator as the literary buffoon of the 20th century, so not to be taken entirely seriously, but he did say this, and it stuck with me since I was a student at Birmingham School of Architecture. The medical profession is a conspiracy to hide its own shortcomings. No doubt the same could be said of all professions. They are all conspiracies against the laity. Until there is a practicable alternative to blind trust, the truth about the doctor is so terrible we dare not face it. I mean, I think that the work that Nigel is doing, and that I would, in my practice, always promote in trying to improve the relationship between our customers, the consumers of the work we do, such that there's a better mutual understanding. We have some hope of overcoming that mistrust, which I think is a blight really on the architectural profession, who is responsible, I'm afraid to say, for really a small minority of the built environment, even in the UK. Most housing is designed without architects, and my view from my time as the president of the RIBA is that the profession has painted itself into a corner, giving away far too much of its competence to other disciplines, and needs to fight its way back. And a really important way of doing so is by increasing its sense of understanding of what the consumers of our work really need. So I refer to this so-called ladder of citizen participation in my work and in my book, which goes from manipulation at the bottom rung, to citizen control. And I think this is relevant to two areas of our work, one which we're not going to be particularly talking about today, but it's the business of engaging with the potential occupants or neighbours of the developments that we are involved in my business, where, to be fair, I think consultation is about as far as most developers and developments get, level 4. Partnership is rare, and citizen control, apart from a very few self-built or cooperatively built developments, is almost entirely absent. But the reason for raising this here is that, in my view, better information enabling choice in the marketplace for rented and purchased homes is a way of delivering level 8 of Sherry Arnstein's 1969 ladder of citizen participation. We can begin to participate in the quality and type of the homes that are available for us to buy at the point that we get the phenomenon of market pull to start to operate in our industry. So the top diagram, these are very similar diagrams. There's hardly any difference at all between the two, but it just goes to show how simple and straightforward the missing ingredient is. What we see so often, and actually I'll be showing a slide at the end of this presentation and referring to this again, is the kind of self-obsession, particularly of professionals in research and development, production, marketing, and then delivery, with a question mark as to whether what we are providing is actually what is needed or wanted. And all that's required is a feedback loop, both into research and development, and then again into the marketing process, testing whether the services or the products that we're delivering are in fact meeting the aspirations and needs of the market that we're serving. And I shall come to that point again at the end of the presentation. The architects in particular like motor car analogies, and actually architects like motor cars as well. I know that's a dreadful simplification, but anyway, I always find it quite helpful to refer to these pioneers. On the left-hand side, you have obviously the 2CV of 1948, designed by André Lefebvre at Citroën, a workers' car, an agrarian vehicle with remarkable innovation despite its simple looks, in particular its torsion bar suspension, which was hidden in the sill under the doors and connected the front and rear axles in such a way that if you hit a bump with the front wheels, the rear wheels responded, so that you were able to bounce to your way down potholed French country lanes in relative comfort. And of course, on the right, the Austin Mini of 1959, designed by Anarchis Agonis. Both these men were what I call designers in industry. They occupied the industrial process in a very intimate way, so that they knew and understood in very close detail the means of production. And that is something that we as professionals really need to understand better. And I have to say, in another talk on another subject, the opportunity for us to be involved in prefabricated housing gives our designers here at HTA and many others I know the opportunity to really become involved in improvements in the product that we are designing, because we understand the technicalities fully. In the case of Isagonis, of course, there's the transverse engine with the gearbox in the sump. But the other thing he knew and understood how to do was turn the shell inside out, so that the seams of the shell of the motor car became the gutters around the roof. He wouldn't have known to do that unless he had a really clear understanding of how to do it. So this is the process. Product labeling leads to better informed customers, selective purchasing, competitive pressure in the marketplace, driving innovation and product quality, diversity and value, and through consumer feedback and consumer rating, you have enhanced performance into place on your product labeling. That is the virtuous cycle that we're relying on here. And there are various missing elements at the moment, aren't there? Product labeling, I'll come on to in a minute, but consumer feedback as well is almost entirely missing in the housing industry, as I'll say later on. But if we were to do it, this is the rate of change that you can get. This is André Lefebvre again, and on the right, the left-hand side is his 1923 Voisin Six Laboratoire. He worked at Voisin, and by the way, Voisin, the Voisin limousine was the vehicle of choice for Le Corbusier. He had a rather beautiful straight eight sleeve valve Voisin, which is pictured often in the front of the Villa Savoie in those photographs. Anyway, there you are, 1923, and the same designer who moved across to Citroën, do the maths, only 30 years later, produced that most remarkable car, which is for many of us the most beautiful and effective and advanced car ever to be built, and yet to be bettered. By contrast, here we have it. That's an 18th century cottage, and on the right-hand side, a 21st century house. That photograph on the right is from my book. It's reproduced by permission of the Daily Mail, who did a story about Nicola and Phil Bentley, who are standing in front of their house there on the driveway. You'll note that the garage is actually too small to accommodate the Nissan that they're very proud to display on their front drive. But the reason this story got into the Mail is because the house had no less than 700 defects. You know, the way that builders are able to get away with that, I can't remember the name of the developer actually, and it's just as well I can't, is really because there's no way of consumers knowing before they make their consumer choices. But the other implication of the lack of the mechanism that I showed on the previous slide is the relatively modest change in the style of the product, at least, in between the early 18th century and the early 21st century. Here we are. Scan the window of a typical British estate agent and you will find precious little to inform you of what it is you're about to be buying. Usually the number of bedrooms, the location, the price, and precious little else. Actually, sometimes the square meterage. Happily, however, David Cameron was not able to scrap the EPC, and much maligned as they are, they remain our only hope of developing a better relationship at a mass scale between our purchasers and our products. And despite the criticism, there is work in hand. I'm sure Nigel will be able to talk about this more, but the government has an EPC plan of action, which has no less than 35 proposed improvements, but the top three of which are improving the accuracy, reliability, and here's the key word, trust in EPCs, engagement in the marketplace to move many, many more houses towards the minimum of Band C, and a data information system improvement to enable policy changes linked to EPCs to leverage improvement in the housing market. So let's not, as many people do, dismissed the EPC as and the display energy certificate as well. There is, I didn't know this, and Nigel, you may be a member of the Property Energy Professionals Association. It's obviously a key organisation. Their manifesto aims for 100% EPC coverage across all of the homes of Britain. They are suggesting that the validity of EPCs be reduced from 10 years at the moment to 3 years, and display energy certificates to 1 year, which is a pretty dramatic improvements. And they are campaigning for the stamp duty taxation and council taxation should be linked to the bands which are displayed in energy performance certificates. So people are thinking about this, and in my view, it really matters. And this is why at HTA we did this piece of work. You can obtain copies of our research here. It's called the Case for Home Performance Labelling. If you Google that, you can get access to a downloaded version of our research. But we looked into the possibility of labelling homes on a far wider range than is currently available through estate agents, and at a system which would enable consumers to prioritise their purchases according to a range of different criteria, which may be more or less important to them. Obviously, floor area, and obviously price, and obviously location. But we added storage area, we added average percentage daylight factor as a criterion for selection, broadband speed, and critically, we added annual energy cost, which of course you can determine from your EPC, and also annual maintenance cost, which we calculated from the replacement cycle for most of the key elements of the small selection that we chose. And some really interesting results from that. Some of the most high performing contemporary homes, especially the ones with a lot of kit, turned out to be the most expensive to run, and the very smallest homes proved to be the least good value. So, I mean, I just think, this was a proof of concept exercise to demonstrate that different ways of looking at the data available on homes produces, different outcomes potentially for prospective purchasers. Now, here's your moment in the sun, Nigel. You've got, I think, 3 or 4 slides here. I'll click on when you tell me to.
Yeah, if you just click on just straight away, there we go. No, I just wanted to just that first one. So, oh no, that's fine. Leave it as we are then. Just a broad comment. So, apologies for the background noise. I found a nice, quiet place to do this, and in the time the meeting has started, I've been surrounded by people making noise. So, apologies for the quality of the sound. But very broadly, we are trying to deliver against some of the things that Ben has been talking about. The idea that in this strange, new, complex world, our homes are going to be full of systems and devices which themselves produce data. We're in a world in which homeowners, because of their general app use on their phones, etc., are actually more likely to be able to deal with information about their home. And we're in a world, because of net zero, where over the next few years, 25 million homeowners are actually going to be required to think about the performance of their home. And based on whether it's the EPC or a more sophisticated replacement of the EPC, homeowners are going to be forced to consider the energy use and emissions outputs of their homes in a way that we've never had before. So the broad background to the kind of the logbook phenomenon is this idea that our homes are becoming more complicated. And as we've got with the slide on the screen, we always talk about before, now, and soon. Before, our homes weren't complicated. You had set keys, and you may have a central heating system with a knob on the wall, and that was about as complicated as it got. We're in this middle kind of area at the moment where things are things have been thrown at us in a very kind of uncoordinated way. So in research, we found homeowners with 5 or kind of 10 apps on their phone already, and so logbooks are an idea of kind of how to tie this middle area up. And we know that, as I say, we need to move homeowners into this future world where they're going to be having to make these decisions. I did like Ben's slide about homeowner participation, because one of the things that we've realised is that nobody in the professionals world assumes that homeowners could or should have access to most of the data that's available on their homes. The whole consumer property data landscape is pre-configured that professionals capture all the data, keep it for themselves, and do things with it. And there is no core presumption that homeowners should be the guardian of the home. They should be the facilities manager of their own home, and they should be the ultimate owner of data related to their home. And that's what the logbook phenomenon is trying to bring to bear. If you just flick through the slides, so this tells the same thing. Apologies, I didn't realise that you were going to take that deck I gave you and just stick it in front of me. I thought that was meant to be kind of a couple of sentences for inspiration. So this isn't necessarily the deck I would have presented. So, but those are the broad things I wanted to get into everybody's mind. The idea that we have to assume in this new digital world that the homeowner is a participant in the digitization of their home. The homeowner is a participant in the improvement of data availability around their home, and that the homeowner should, as I've mentioned before, be the ultimate facilities manager. And a digital logbook like Chimni is intended to be the recipient of all of those things. And we are huge fans of the work Ben did on property labelling. If you just flick through to the end of these slides,
well, this is the last one, Nigel, and
okay. Yeah, as I say, this flick on it, because these weren't actually meant to be stuck up in this way. So as I say, that from the digital logbook point of view, we absolutely support Ben's vision for labelling. We would go further than just labelling. We would go as far as saying that homeowners should have this tool, which is interactive, it's live. They should have actually live access to all the live data available about their property, and also be the people in charge of sharing that data as and when they need to share it. So when we talk about channels to market, we think it should be the homeowner's choice to be able to share all the data on their property with a conveyancer or an estate agent or a rental agent. We think that new build developers should be actually showing the way, even though that in terms of numbers they're not going to be huge. But all new build properties should be being delivered with a digital logbook from now on. It should be mandatory, and you may know that logbooks like Chimni are actually now mandatory in France and in Belgium for all new build, and they're mandatory for any home that's had significant renovations such that the EPC has been improved. And that's the first time we've seen it across Europe.
Yeah, I mean, I actually like this slide. Say again? I actually like this slide, Nigel, because I think there's a danger in this country that people think that a prop tech startup, it's all very well, but first of all, how is it going to gain a foothold? And secondly, how relevant is it, particularly when we had a government, in the coalition, who scrapped everything that we had. Previously in place, put by the new Labour government by way of home information packs. So there is this idea, quite widespread, that home information is an obstacle to the marketplace rather than an accelerant in the marketplace. So I was interested in this slide, which was showing ways in which you're going to get your product out to no less than 5 million of the 25 million homes in the UK through various different channels. So I mean, the reason I back Chimni.
Yeah. I said we're talking about whether we can cut 25 weeks off the conveyancing process. If somebody's got a complete logbook, they cut out all the need to go searching for the information. And so somebody with a Chimni logbook, if they want to sell, should just be able to press a button and share digitally a pack of information with conveyancers and estate agents for their properties to be immediately put on the market. And as I say, we're looking to cut 20, 25 weeks out of conveyancing just because of the availability of good information with the property as it gets.
Okay, so now I'm going to move on to another aspect of all of this, another missing cog in that virtuous cycle that I showed earlier, which is post-occupancy evaluation. So this is also from my book. 13 out of 14 passive house and 35 out of 43 non-passive house dwellings did not meet the predicted energy use, and actually did not meet the predicted energy use by miles for a variety of different reasons. The middle one of which, design specification and workmanship, not being in accordance with everyone's expectations in the process. Obviously, we can't change the weather, and actually changing people's behaviours is quite difficult. But at least if we got to a better understanding of the performance of our own product in a technical sense, we would become more knowledgeable and be able to complete that virtuous cycle that I discussed. So I got together with 3 other housing practices. You can see them on the documents on the right-hand side: Levitt, Bernstein, Pollard, Thomas, Edwards, and PRP. And we have come up with a template for post-occupancy evaluation, and we are attempting to bring together a collaboration of willing participants amongst our clients to join this process. There is tremendous resistance from housing developers of all different kinds to this process. It's very basic. It's really the phenomenon that people don't really want to try to find out what they'd rather not know, and that they can predict won't be terribly embellishing of their reputation. So all I say to that is that if that was the behaviour of aircraft manufacturers, planes would be falling out of the sky on a daily basis. We really must get better at this. This document, actually 2 documents, are available on the websites of all of the participating practices, and we are putting together at the moment this collaboration of the willing amongst developers to work with us to basically engage the design professions in post-occupancy evaluation. This is a bit of an arid slide, but basically it summarizes every stage in the plan of work, and the kinds of activities that we want to take place, and that is all too rare in agreements that we're able to make with our clients when we are appointed. So coming towards the end, back to that R&D push versus consumer pull. There is, of course, a tremendous and very exciting history of well-intentioned prototypes for improved methods of construction and enhanced designs for housing. And the illustrations here are well known to all architects. The top line is from Walter Gropius's 1936 book about the new architecture. The bottom sequence is from Buckminster Fuller, and in the middle you've got Charles and Ray Eames with their beautiful house in Pacific Palisades on the left-hand side. Very much worth a visit, but you have to book. And of course, Jean Prouvé's house, of which there are a few that were built, but that is a replica planted by the Seine in Paris. The key thing about all of these is they were absolutely lovely, but they had no customers, and that is for us a key point. And in praise of post-occupancy evaluation, it's not all bad news. These are quotes from a resident who lives at our Hanham Hall project in Bristol, which was a government exemplar project in the sequence of new millennium villages that was instigated by the new Labour government in the early years of the 20th century. So it had very, very high standards of environmental and biodiversity performance, and it's been the subject of thoroughgoing technical and social post-occupancy evaluation. And that quote from a resident, I think, is all we need to say about the benefits of trying to set higher standards and then being brave enough to go and find out whether you've succeeded in delivering them from the point of view of the consumers of your efforts. So that's it. I promised 40 minutes to Simon.
You've delivered that. Thank you very much.
We've delivered.
Yes,
thank you very much indeed. And I'm sorry for the technical glitches, but I hope you managed to stay with us.
Yeah, that fascinating presentation, actually. I mean, just picking up on the last slide, when it comes to post-occupancy evaluation, we've had, we as a consultancy advocate it, and then we've had Seblan Lomas on from Archetype talking about how they try and instigate it as much as possible. But in terms of sort of just a few people trying to change that and bang that drum, did you feel as if it's, until you get people who would sign up for it from the home builder side, I suppose it's going to be the guys that have really sort of procured when it comes to, you know, on the basis of social value, or they've adopted the home performance labeling, so they're going to be much more confident to do it, I suppose. I
think the people who need to do it are, and we're doing an increasing number of build to rent schemes where you have an institutional investor and you have an operator of rented accommodation, where it's really competitive and really important for the developer and building management to know and understand the experience of their renters of the homes that they are occupying. So and that seems to us to be a fruitful place to start, as well as, of course, social housing landlords and housing associations in particular. So our collaboration of the willing is most likely to be coming from those two segments. The house builders have their own alleged star system. It's almost entirely about people's perceptions of the sales experience, not about people's perceptions of the dwelling experience. Although there are now some websites, what's it called? Just Living, I think, where you know, a bit like the online websites for holiday homes and so on. You can get open source feedback on accommodation.
Ben, I don't know what your experience of developers is, but we haven't seen any kind of large-scale adoption of the idea that data is now part of the product. Even and we work with some developers, and we still find that it's still an afterthought. Even with some, we work with modular developers. This idea that a homeowner is actually buying a complex system in a modern world, and that a data and an app should be part of the product, is still kind of absent from the market.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of them are quite proud of their supply of their lever-arched ring binder that they leave in a kitchen unit. But of course, you know, it needs to be live data, because, you know, they need to be reminded, you know, when the filters in their cooker hood need changing, you know, when their boiler needs servicing, all of those kinds of things. So, yeah, I mean, I think the uptake is slow, but that's why I never tire in reminding people of the potential benefits.
No, and I think it comes there down also. There's probably a willing. I only this week I was speaking with a guy who works for a tech company that is looking to. They've now flipped from residential to commercial, because they'd like to install metering in every building, in order for that building owner to understand what's going on in it, so therefore they can make decisions about how they use it, blah blah blah. So they own the data, what you're suggesting, Nigel. But when it came to residential, they were speaking to all the large home builders, and the home builders at the top, the guys were, yeah, fantastic, sounds brilliant. But then when it comes to actually delivering, so therefore understanding how they were going to design these homes to introduce this tech that allowed them to record all of the data that's been downloaded from the heating systems, etc., and everything within those properties. But then the work, the people on the ground who are actually, the electricians, etc., they just didn't know how to implement it. So you've got this big skills gap, and you've got this gap there where there's an idea, and people sign it off, but then they just can't deliver on it. It's really, really quite disappointing.
And what's odd is, we love the car analogy, Ben, as well. In the prop tech world, if you buy a new Tesla or a new high-end any brand nowadays, you get an app, and the app brings you live data. The app helps you control the vehicle. It helps you link to suppliers. The Tesla app does almost everything that we're trying to do with the Chimni app, but there's no assumption amongst senior execs in the house building industry who are probably driving cars with apps that they should be delivering the same thing with these complex systems they're building that we call homes.
Yeah, quite agree. Well, we continue to proselytize, Nigel and Simon, and that's why I'm here.
Yeah. Well, no, and good luck. So people are bizarrely joining as we're finishing. But like I say, this will be recorded, and it's been really interesting presentation. So I will upload it. So if you have just joined, then you'll be able to watch it on recap. And in the past, I've heard you talk, Nigel, about sort of long life, loose fit, and low energy. And I live in a Edwardian property, and sometimes I get a bit fed up with living in such a property. And so there was a development down the road for me, and it's taken 4 years and it's still behind schedule. And I went in and I was interested to find out what they were offering. But when it comes to long life, probably loose fit, definitely not. I mean, they look glossy, but I don't think many people do design for loose fits. They're great empty, but once you live in them, it's different. Where do you put all of your stuff? And they promise on low energy, but I'm not sure if they're there yet. So it seems to me UK house builders have a terrible reputation, really, for delivering good quality housing. But it's not many people like you guys, and the people who subscribe to Meshwork. They're the ones that are driving change. No one else is. Interesting, you said about Hannam Hall, and it was built by Barratt Homes. They can build properties and buildings and housing in the right way. They just need to be told to do so.
I'd agree. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, guys. Session's gone very, very well and quite quickly. So yeah, thanks for joining, and we'll have a session next week. But yeah, I'll upload this onto Meshwork tomorrow. And yeah, look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Simon, and thank you, Nigel.
Pleasure. Thanks for joining us. Cheers, guys. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Everyone.